What's up, Superfam, and welcome to Comic Talk, the segment on my channel where we come together and we talk about comics. My name is Brad, and I'll be your host. Now, with today's episode of Comic Talk, we're going to be talking about issue number 26 of Superman Comics, and it's the first issue of Superman to come out following the whole Manchester Black thing that was happening previously in Superman Comics. Now, popping both of the covers for Superman issue number 26 up on the screen, we can see that no matter which one you chose, you would have gotten some pretty amazing cover art. I personally went with the one with Superman with the eagle on his wrist and the American flag behind him because it's very classic looking, and it's actually a throwback to Superman issue number 14 from way back in the day. And really, how fitting that it came out so close to the 4th of July. I mean, come on, that was perfect timing. Now, this issue of Superman Comics is actually really interesting for a number of reasons. For one, there's this parallel story arc going on where we see Superman trying to teach his son patience and how to do things the right way, and not just run into things headlong just because you now have all these powers. And then we also see Jonathan Kent doing the same thing with young Clark, who was presumably roughly the same age as John is in the present day, and he's trying to teach Clark, hey, you've got these powers, but there is a right way to do things. You can't just be cocky and just depend on your powers, because if you rush into things, you can do things wrong. And so, on the Clark Kent side of things, when he's younger, basically we see Pa Kent gives Clark the run of the farm for the day, and he's like, you're going to do my job for the day, and I know you're probably thinking that's easy and you could get everything that I'd get done in a day, you could get it done in no time, but there's going to be a catch. You're going to run the farm, but you're going to do it without using your powers. You're going to do it the right way. And he's like, you can do this with the Combine, and I'm going to be watching, so no using your powers, no cheating. On the other hand, we have young John Kent and a grown-up Superman, and Superman is doing the same thing. He's trying to teach John how to be patient and do things the right way, and so he ends up giving John the reins for the day and saying, okay, now you get to be Superman for the day, you get to call the shots. And we get to see how Clark and how John both handle having that responsibility handed to them by their fathers. We see Clark eventually decide that he doesn't want to use the Combine, and he decides he's just going to use his powers anyway because he thinks that Pa can't see him, and he ends up harvesting an entire row of wheat, but in the process, he ruins it because he just does it at super speed. But it's all wrecked, it's all useless, and then Pa kind of comes up behind him. He probably knew that Clark was going to do that, right? I mean, you know your own son. And he uses that as a teachable moment, and Clark is devastated to know that he destroyed all of the wheat. Now, in the end, Pa wasn't actually that upset with Clark. I mean, he was, but he was just as upset with himself for expecting Clark to do things his way, rather than letting Clark kind of figure out his own way to do things. Just because someone doesn't do things your way doesn't mean it's not necessarily being done the right way. I'm sure if Clark wasn't just trying to be sneaky and go behind his father's back, he probably would not have harvested all that wheat at super speed and then damaged it all. He probably would have done things a little bit differently. Now, on the other side, we have this parallel story where John's been doing things just willy-nilly. He hasn't really been thinking about things as he goes in. For example, there's this fight where John and Superman are fighting these robots, and where Superman would actually just step back, take a thought, try and figure things out, John is just smashing them all to bits. And sure, he's doing a great job of smashing them to bits and neutralizing the threat. However, we also see that he's causing some damage that Superman really wouldn't cause. There's a scene where Superman actually flies up into the sky, tries to draw some of these android robotic drones towards him to expose the leader, and he does that, but John then smashes it before Superman has a chance to find out who sent them in the first place, which is what Superman was trying to do. Use his head and his muscle. This is the source of why Superman is getting frustrated, because he feels like John's just not listening. And Superman can't have a loose cannon son with all those powers who won't listen to what he says, because someone's going to get hurt, someone's going to get killed, and the world is not going to be a better place because of it. It's interesting to see that Superman is suffering from a lot of the same things that a lot of fathers end up worrying about, which is, am I doing a good enough job for my kids? Can I do better? That kind of self-doubt is actually normal. Now, when John gets to be Superman for the day, we see that, yes, he gets things done, but it's not in the most efficient way. You know, there's a burning building scene where John rushes in to save the people, and the saving the people is good, and he succeeds, but it's kind of luck because Superman would always assess the situation first. And there's a point where John didn't check to see if the building was stable enough to sustain some of the damage that he ended up putting it through to save the people, whereas the whole building could have collapsed and John would have been none the wiser. In the end, he would have been partially responsible for the deaths of all those people. And Clark doesn't want that for his son. And he definitely doesn't want that for the people. There's also a part in this comic where Superboy and Superman show up to save a runaway train, and Superboy flies up to stop the train, and while he's doing that, Superman is like, no, wait, just make sure that you don't stop it too fast, because if you do, and Superboy is like, yeah, I know, if I stop it too fast, the cars will buckle. Don't worry, I got this. There's that point of letting go, where Superman is actually having to learn to trust his son to make the right decisions, in the same way that Jonathan had to learn to let go and trust Clark to make the right decisions. But it all comes to a head when we have the main event where we actually get to see who sent the drones in the first place. It's actually Dreadnought and Siphon, two characters which I'm sure if you've been a long-time DC fan, you'll be familiar with. Basically, they're the ones who sent the drones, and they're always trying to do something crappy to planet Earth, take it over. They're always trying to take over some planet, and it just happens that they're on Earth this time. And Superman and John have to confront them. Now, when Superman and John arrive on the scene, basically Superman is trying to give him some advice. He's trying to give him some information about the supervillains he's about to fight, and John doesn't want to hear any of it. John is, again, he's 11, he's rebellious, he thinks he can do everything himself his own way, and he just rushes in. Except for Siphon actually takes away his powers temporarily. It's like a thing he can do. After that, Dreadnought punches him clear across the sky into a building. And that's when Superboy is like, hey, what's going on? How did that happen? My powers, they disappeared. Superman flies up to John and he's incredibly concerned for him. He's like, listen, I'm gonna fly you home, then I'm gonna come back and deal with this. And John's like, no, I'm all right. But what happened to my powers? And, you were right. And he realizes at that point that, you know, although he can do a lot of stuff by himself, there is still wisdom in being humble enough to take the time to listen to what the experience of your father, or the experience of anyone who has more of it in general, has to say to you. Their counsel is something that you can't just brush aside like it's nothing. And he's learning that. Now, it's after this point that Superman and Superboy could actually begin to work together as a team. Superman giving Superboy a little bit more trust, and Superboy listening to his father and respecting what he has to say a little bit more. They basically mop the floor with Siphon and Dreadnought in no time flat because teamwork. Superman flies Dreadnought up, tosses him into the vacuum of space, while Siphon gets back in his ship and takes off, presumably to go grab Dreadnought from space. Don't you worry, Dreadnought can actually withstand the vacuum of space, so no worries there, Superman didn't kill Dreadnought. Now after that, we see John and Clark, they're at home and they're having this father and son moment on the roof. And it's this whole thing where Clark is learning to let go and learning to trust John, and John is learning to respect his father. And it's a really great moment where you know that things are going to be different. They're not going to be perfect from this point on. They never are. John's a kid and he's still growing up. And Superman is still learning how to be a dad, even after all these years. I mean, with a child that is constantly growing and changing, you're always having to tackle new obstacles. And this is a new obstacle, and it's a big one for Superman. And I'm sure there's going to be lots of challenges. But now we see that they're working together and they've came to an understanding, and that things are probably going to be all right. I love this story for so many reasons. I love the fact that we get this whole parallel story where we get to see how the events of a young Clark Kent's life and the things that his father did for him and helped shape him into the man that he is today, how that is informing how he is behaving and handling the situations with his son, who also has superpowers. I think that it's a great parallel story. And this story is exemplary of one of the reasons why I love Superman comics so much. That they take the time out to actually examine and do things like this and tell these stories that I know for me, as a father and a husband, are completely relatable and valid in my life. I can take the lesson that I learned in this comic book and I can actually apply it to my life with my sons and daughter. It's not just a punch out, but it's a very real story here. Now, I would give this issue of Superman Comics a straight up 10 out of 10 for every reason that you've heard me mention in this episode of Comic Talk. If you've been watching this far and haven't been sleeping, then you know why I love it. I don't have to tell you why I love it. Straight up 10 out of 10 for me. And if you don't have it, I really think that you need to pick this issue up, because if you're a Superman fan, this is an important moment in the Superman mythos, because they haven't yet examined this kind of theme between John and Superman. This is the first time they've done this, so this is technically a first in Superman comics as far as I'm concerned. And with that, the video is over. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Comic Talk. It means so much to me. If you've liked this video, please slap a like on it so I know you like it. If you have anything to say at all, please leave it in the comments down below. And if you think you might want to see more of this kind of content, then just hit the subscribe button and you will never miss a video. And until next time, keep it real, geeks. I'll see you later.